I would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Welcome to Cult-Worthy Conversations, a special segment of the podcast where I welcome a special guest onto the show to discuss their passions, their history, and what they want to see in their future. This week, I am joined by my friend and co-host of my new podcast, Back to the Balcony, Justin Henson of the Movie Wire. Justin, welcome to the Cult-Worthy, as if you've never been here before.
It's good to be back on the Cult-Worthy. I swear I see you more than my family right now, and it's not a bad thing. I mean, it's always a pleasure being back on the Cult-Worthy.
It's like you're my Tuesday night date, right? We do Back to the Balcony on Tuesday nights, 9:30. It's like catching your favorite TV show, and here we are doing it on a Sunday, 10 p.m. at night, where everyone's like trying to be asleep. But no, it's good to have you back to talk about something other than Siskel and Ebert. And we can't lie, this is a shameless plug for our new podcast, Back to the Balcony.
Yeah, well worth it, because I think me and you are having a blast doing this show, and I think we've had a lot of great conversation. And again, it's always a great conversation when it comes to movies and, of course, a fantastic host. But I think this is a worthy plug, because I think if you haven't tuned into Back to the Balcony, you're missing out, because there's a lot of great things coming down the pipeline. And it now is a better time than any to tune in.
Well, we were just talking about it before we hit the record button that we suck at marketing. Like, I love speaking to people. I love being on the microphone. I love talking to people on the camera. But when it comes to like getting my shit out there and promoting it and making little cover arts and TikToks and Reels and YouTube shorts, there's like nothing worse for me than doing that part. And if I had the money, I'd pay someone to do it. But one of the things that we really haven't done, you're a little bit better at it than me, is talk about our new podcast on our shows. You know, like we're playing the clips and we're playing little teasers and trailers, but I'm not sure we ever really took a second to sit and really talk about the concept and where it's going and what we want it to be and why we are so excited to talk about two critics who, you know, have been dead for a while, but their message lives on. And I think that's what I really want to get in today, but also give my listeners the opportunity to get to know my co-host of my other show better. So that's why we are doing Cult-Worthy Conversations. So to kind of get into it, we're 4 episodes in now, aired, of our new show. And it's a Siskel and Ebert retrospective. We take turns choosing a wide release film. We discuss it, we debate it, and we come to our own conclusions of its cinematic merit. But most importantly, the whole point of the show is we discuss the critiques of Siskel and Ebert and where we think they got it right and where we think they got it wrong, and how relevant is their critique to today's audiences, today's society, today's culture. You know, because we got a lot of younger people watching movies now. Would they take to heart what these middle-aged dudes back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s said about movies? That's like the big question, and that's what our show's about. My question for you, man, is how do you think it's going?
Honestly, I think it's going fantastic. I mean, I think the biggest challenge for us is I think we're almost alike when it comes to our taste of movies, where it's almost hard to kind of debate, because when you bring a movie, I'm like, I like that movie. Well, coming soon, we debate, but it's rare that we have a movie that we both dislike. And as we look at the list of planning down the road, we might have a little bit of debate here and there, but I think when it comes to the movie, we are pretty much almost on the same page. But when it comes to the critique, that's where we have almost different perspectives. And I think between me and you, this is where I think the treasure is with this show, is you are huge and your knowledge is a lot more diverse with a lot of the older movies. And again, I do a lot of more contemporary. And I think combined, getting two different viewpoints of whether these critiques hold up is the magic of it. And what I think I've learned specifically is I know how to kind of read the Roger Ebert piece of it, but combined with the times of the 70s, 80s, 90s, the big question mark of does it hold up? And as we get deeper into conversation, it almost becomes an epiphany at one point in the middle of conversation of maybe it didn't hold up, maybe it did hold up. So I think we are getting into that discovery piece mid conversation while we are discussing these movies. So most of it is just completely spontaneous where we have our opinions, but it comes together in unison at the end where we both get into a discovery of current reviews and current relevance of these movies based on these critiques. So I think that's what's so special about it.
I think too, one of the things that I realized, because now we've recorded 10 episodes, we're only releasing the fourth one this coming week, is that I forget that with my show, I literally get to watch the movies I want to watch and talk about the movies I want to talk about. If I don't like a movie, I just don't talk about it. I'm not a shit talker. I'm not going to post an episode of like, oh, this movie sucked. You know, maybe once in a while I'll guest on another show where I can shit on a movie, but I try to keep that off of mine. I forget that you are doing like the Lord's work in the sense that you are going to see movies that I'm sure you would not really pick if you had the choice. You are doing the critic's job of exposing new films that are either theatrical releases or streaming releases that may not fit in your wheelhouse, may not fit in the type of category of film that you enjoy talking about, but you're taking the critic's responsibility of giving an honest critique and opinion. Sometimes it's spicy, sometimes you're pleasantly surprised, but I don't do that. Like, I really don't go and find contemporary films on streaming sites or on the Cinemark, you know, that I want to go see. I pick what I want because my time is valuable. And if I'm picking movies, which happens a lot that I've never seen before, it's because they were recommended by someone, or it's a filmmaker who that might be like a missing piece in their catalog that I haven't seen, or an actor. So I think that's the other thing that makes this new podcast fascinating too, is that you're entering the conversation with that critic's eye of, I'm watching something for the first time. It's nothing that I would have gone and sought out on my own. Antonio gave me another weird movie to watch, like that kind of thing. Where for the most part, how I've been picking my movies is I'm trying to do a rotation. One's a movie I desperately want to talk about. And then I'll try and find a film that they were split on. And maybe I've seen it, maybe I haven't. But whatever my opinion is, we can talk about that at the first part of the episode and then dive into why they were split. We recorded an episode last week that they were very split on. You and I both love the movie, but I didn't pick it because I loved it. I picked it because they were so split on it, and it's now kind of considered an all-time classic. So I think that's how we're keeping it fresh and not falling down that stagnant line of, I'm only going to talk about the movies I like, and Justin's only going to pick the movies that he likes, you know?
Yeah, and a lot of the movies that we've picked, they're to kind of the respect to your show is some of these movies do need a revisit, and some may not have seen these movies, and they solely base it on the review of Siskel and Ebert from when it first came out,
Right.
or they're looking at reviews or IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes, whatever it may be now. So, but again, we have to go into that. Everybody's going to have their own opinion, and when I go into a movie, it's one of those aspects. Sometimes I am dragging my feet because I really don't want to see this movie. Sometimes it takes me by surprise. Sometimes it doesn't. But it's one of those that even if it's a movie that I really don't want to see, there are different aspects that I'm looking at. And when we're looking at comparison to movies current to how it relates to previous movies, I mean, there's a lot of comparisons and a lot of reminders of movies that just pop up that a movie might remind me of.
It's like, oh, I have to go watch another Garfield movie or another animated cat movie, or I have to watch another movie with talking dogs. You know, like, I get it. That's why I don't go to the theater anymore.
Yeah. And with how expensive movies are, it's one of those that we don't really have any real voice on podcasting that has all these movies covered. It's usually a single movie here or a single movie here. People are relying on Rotten Tomatoes or IMDb and just skimming reviews without really hearing the reviews. So, and I think that's really important, is to hear a full opinion, not a 2 sentence snippet of what a reviewer thought on a symbol of a red tomato or a green splat. So I think it's really important to really have the full opinion, and to have a listener go to a movie and discover that opinion for themselves. And again, like I said in my first couple of episodes, open up a conversation. My opinion means nothing. It's just my opinion. It's what you're going to take away from it. And whether my opinion opens up a discussion, that's a win.
Well, so I think you nailed something that's, I think, very important to this conversation about contemporary cinema, is that obviously the media companies in the industry have dumbed down movies, television, anything that we absorb with our eyes and our ears. They've dumbed down for us, including the art of critique. Like, you used to have 500 to 1,000 words in every newspaper publication in the world about what movies were coming out. You'd have a full 2 pages of what was playing at your local theater. And now there's less theaters, so there's less space. There's less room for those words. And people don't take the time to read anymore. They also don't take the time to watch regular TV and the morning show and see whatever critic they have on there talk about a movie. Like, that's long gone. So I think cinema appreciators are listening to podcasts about movies. People that might like the host or like the voice or like the message, or it's just something to do on the way to work, they're listening. But I think that the idea of, I need some kind of watermark to know whether or not a movie is worth my time and money, has been so dumbed down and simplified to a simple red tomato or a green splat, or a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Like, these aggregators, as much as I do love how the people get their voice out there now, it's easily manipulated. We all know that. Payola scandals left and right of like paying critics and paying studios to get the ratings up so people will go. Like, that never went away. Come on. That is why I think that we see box office bombs happen more often, because the system of checks and balances has been dumbed down so much and so simplified that it's given up the adventure of just going out to seeing a movie and seeing if it's good or not on your own. I think that's the case.
Yeah, you hit it with just the watermark. Where's the point, right? And again, sometimes you'll have a review that's just so bad that people are still going to go to the movie to see if it's really that bad.
Right.
And
on $5 Tuesday.
$5, yeah. I mean, if I totally destroy a movie, I guarantee you half those people are going to go see it to see if it's really that bad. And some people might not think it's that bad. But you know what? I think the most important thing is the watermark, because the watermark, like you pointed out, that's going to determine where your expectation is. But at the end of the day, I don't make that decision. Nobody makes that decision. But you're right. Reviews have been so dumbed down. It's so misleading. Like, which reviewer gets to the top of the list this week, or who's getting the most hits to deserve this spot to have his opinion, his 2-3 sentences heard. So there's a lot of question marks on how these reviews are handled. And there is a lot of mistrust with a lot of those aspects of it. That's why a review and a critique that we've touched on our show, and we said it in numerous episodes, of tell us why. Tell us what you're feeling with the movie. Don't just give us snippets of what they did or this one character that you just didn't like and that judges the entire movie. You need to really prolong that feeling of why and tell the audience of why. And that's what's really missing to most critiques now, is just who's going to have the louder voice, even though I know I can be loud on movies that I hate. But you still have to back it up with that aspect of why.
No, I agree 100%. And that's why we chose this format for this new podcast, because we're both enamored and at the same time disappointed by Siskel and Ebert and a lot of the critiques, but also they built a platform. They built an empire of that balcony where they watch these movies, and we tune into them on Sundays and listen to their reviews. Is it going to be a thumbs up? Is it going to be a thumbs down, 2 up, 2 down, whatever? That is one of the things that I think really fascinated me about this idea. And when you decided like you wanted to jump on this and do it together, the thing that really surprised me is how much I debate with them in my mind as we are talking about these films between the two of us. Whether or not we are both on the same page with the film, when it comes to their critique, it's like there are sometimes they're so eloquent. I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I expect from you. And then there's other times that we're like, well, anyone could have said that. Anybody could have written that down, but they're tuning into you. And I think that's what I've learned so far about this process and going through these reviews is that as high of a throne we've put these characters on, sometimes they were just mere mortals when it came to their opinion, but even more so how they verbalized their opinion. And in a way, it's kind of humanizing to them. And that can be disappointing, but at the same time, it makes me appreciate the fact that they are just humans and that was just their opinion. Like their word wasn't gospel. What do you think you've learned so far in this process?
Well, and I think what you just said, 100%. And when we look at the critics, they are just human. And when we get the first reactions from Siskel and Ebert, they are first reactions. They're not seeing it multiple times.
Right.
This is how they're reacting the first time. And whether they still had that same feeling down the road, we will never know because they saw every movie. They saw just about any big release. And it's really hard for a critic, especially ones that are put on a pedestal, to really zero in on a show, a newspaper, and to really say, you know what, that movie deserves an article or a special spot on a show. Or now they lucked out. Ebert had blogs to really kind of correct some of those movies.
Yeah.
But back then, they didn't have that platform. So I think the lesson that I've learned right now is to really pay attention to the words and the reasoning. I spoke to the reason why, but it's really listening to kind of how they articulate the first 3-minute conversation that they had to push through on a TV show of this review, because that was almost the Rotten Tomatoes of that time.
Yeah.
Where they do have literally 3 minutes to review a movie. So I think I think they had a learning curve too, going and evolving the show, but they're put on a pedestal, but they are only human. At the end of each year, I know I go through the 200 movies I've seen each year, and I pick out ones that I want to revisit just to make sure I got it right. They didn't have that opportunity back then, and that's something in current times that we almost forget.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, just over here on the other side of my desk, I got all these books, like these volumes of Leonard Maltin movie guides and the 2007 Video Hounds movie retriever. You know, there used to be an industry behind this where I think people wanted to educate themselves and go back and look. And there's always something in my mind that having something tangible, like a book, or I have several crates of Entertainment Weeklies downstairs from 1990 till I think 2002 or 2003. There's something about going back and looking at those because a lot of that stuff was never digitized. A lot of that stuff was never like put onto the internet. You might find it like on Internet Archive or something like that, but we've been able to find nearly every episode of Siskel and Ebert on YouTube or on Daily Motion. Like it's somewhere. Someone's retained that because they didn't have to like scan it, copy it, shred it, and whatever, put it into a computer. It was out there, and they captured it, and now it's ours to look at and listen to and play clips of. What do you think the main difference is between being able to read something off a page in the terms of review and understanding what the message is of the appreciation of the film or of the constructive criticism versus listening and seeing someone, whether it's a podcaster or reviewers like Siskel and Ebert, talk about it either on film or on tape or digitized? Is there a difference in appreciation and retention of the review of the criticism? Because I think there is. I've definitely noticed it as I've gone back.
100%. And as we read the Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert reviews, there are times I have to go back and read and find what I missed, because we'll have a huge rant from Ebert and then he gives it kind of a 3-star. And even with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, we had that discussion where the TV, when on the show, he was a little bit nicer in his review than what we saw on TV. So there's a lot of difference. Hearing the passion come directly from the person giving the review, I think is a huge piece. It's we can kind of almost relate it to now when it comes to uh, blogs. We can even written reviews today, or even reading a text message. I mean, it's so easy to interpret a message and an article the way the writer maybe didn't want that intended to sound, and we get that a lot in reviews. It's almost like a creative mindset of brainstorming when we actually read a review. Because I know a lot of critics out there. John Hartle, that I met years ago before his passing, and for the Seattle Times that wrote reviews, he would brainstorm 3 pages of notes and then just insert and connect the dots. So there's a lot of brainstorming emotion that goes into that might not translate to the final result of the review. But listening and seeing the actual critic express that emotion is more impactful than reading. And I'm a huge fan of going back and reading reviews, but at times it may not work.
Yeah, I'm the same way too. And it's like I can't help but read, let's say, Leonard Maltin's books without reading it in his voice. He may as well be speaking it to me anyway. So I always thought that was like the interesting thing, and we've come across that a lot where we see differences in their written reviews as opposed to their spoken ones. So the format is great. I love it. I love what we're doing, but can't help but think that we're going to end up changing some things in the future as we get better at this, as we start kind of figuring out what our flow is. I mean, the last 3 episodes for sure, which haven't even been released yet, I think we're definitely falling into a groove. So I'm really excited about that. What else are you excited for about the show? Like, where do you want this to go? What do you think the evolution is as we get better at deciphering these reviews and even picking some more obscure films?
I think the evolution of how we talk about the films is what I'm excited for, because we're going to get deep diving into a lot of films, and some of them are going to be popular that everybody's seen, some of them not so much. And I think the evolution of one discussing and finding kind of movies that we both kind of debate on, and I think that will be a big piece of it, because I'm always open to your perspective on it. I respect it. I absolutely love your views of movies. And I think when we go into discovery of each other, we're going to go into a deeper discovery of Siskel and Ebert that I really hope people are really engaged with, because I'm learning a little bit more, because as we get into the reviews, I'm taking one review of Siskel and Ebert and I'm bouncing that off of another review that I'm researching
Right.
5 minutes later. So we're going down a rabbit hole that's going to really unlock, I think, a lot of great discussion. And that's what I'm really looking forward to, is how we evolve and how our view of Siskel and Ebert is going to evolve as well.
Well, and see, that's one of the things that's hard for me, is because I'm such a big fan of what you do, but to keep the show honest, right? I don't look at your letterbox. I don't look at your review. I don't look at your website. I don't want any insights to what you're doing or thinking that are going to sway me on what my movie picks are or what my opinions are of the film. Like, the more of a mystery I can keep you in the engagement, I think the better for the show, because I'm like an open book, and I got like 5,000 reviews on Letterboxd. You could go and probably pick out what movie I'm going to talk about eventually. I also try to throw ones in there that I haven't seen. That'll give me an opportunity to like walk in fresh. But to me, that's the biggest challenge for me, is keeping someone who I'm so fond of in the dark. Like, I can't talk to you about these movies. We have to save it for the show. And it's fun. It gives me something to look forward to every Tuesday to talk about this. But at the same time, I'm just like, oh, I really want to know what he thinks about it. And I think we're both pretty good at being like, yeah, we'll talk about it on Tuesday. I'm not going to give too much away.
I'm the same way. I like that open dialogue where we're just going at it for the first time. And it's tempting to really, because I want to know. But at the same time, I'm more interested in the conversation. And I think we've done a really good job, even though I think we're sneaking in a little bit more and more teasers here and there
Yeah.
of what we're watching, or even a suggestion I did last week. I'm like, no. So I think we're doing a good little teasing act of how we're going to do, but we really don't know until we actually do a rewatch. And a lot of these movies, we don't really rewatch until we get, maybe with me at least a week to 2 weeks, because I really want it to be fresh and have enough time to watch it a couple times if I have to.
Yeah, I've been watching them like 2 or 3 times the same way, 100%. So now that we've kind of talked about our show, it's the opportunity because you've been on a lot of my episodes. I think you're my most frequent guest on the Cultworthy over the last 2.5 years I've been doing the show. And we've like talked about the movie wire, but really we haven't talked about what got you in to this medium that we're both in now. And like we're deep in it now. We've got multiple shows and we keep brainstorming about new things. It's like, oh, do we have the time and money to do this? Who cares? Let's just do it. That kind of stuff. What got you into this medium, man?
Yeah, I mean, when I started with podcasting, it was really with a show that I had no passion for, and it was mainly there to give company to a friend, because it was during the pandemic. Like a lot of people got into podcasting during the pandemic as something to do, but the conversation after about a year, it's just I couldn't get into it. I didn't really believe in the conversation, and it's something that I didn't really want to research. It was almost a chore getting into it, and
Yeah, chore is the biggest word.
absolutely. And even though I love the conversation, I love the company, but I wanted to take something, and towards the end of that show, I integrated some movie reviews, and I begged, give me something that I'm really passionate about. And I started a couple movie reviews throwing in there, and it got a great response. And that was almost my calling, saying, this is what I've been wanting to do. This is what I've been doing for most of my life. And with the love of movies that I have, I just didn't want to say I love movies and have just conversations. Everybody can do that. I really wanted my mark to be a staple and be out there, for my kids to revisit, for people that are a fan of my show to kind of go back and revisit, or people that hear my show 2, 3 years down the road and they want a movie recommendation and they're going through my reviews. So I wanted it to be a mark, to really be there as access to the public, because like I said, there's not a ton of podcasts that covers a lot of movies and new releases in a timely manner and all at once like mine. And that's where I wanted that idea. And I really had to invest that time. And when it comes to movies, and I know we've had that conversation, dialogue is huge with me with movies. That's what I wanted this show to be, is not just me talking, this movie sucks, don't go see it. I wanted the why, and I wanted it to be a vehicle to really open up conversation and even give kind of light to some movies that don't really get a lot of shine. So there's been
Yeah.
some independent movies out there that honestly, they've surprised me, and I really wish they would just take off. So it's to give a lot of recognition across the board to cinema.
Yeah, I'm here in Utah, and a lot of my critic friends out here, they're in Sundance right now. And so I keep seeing their posts. I'm like, no, don't want to hear too much. Let me experience it for myself. I feel you. The Movie Wire is your main content. It's your main show. What was the root of the name? What was the root of that particular concept? Like, why the Movie Wire?
This one took me forever to come up with, because it was probably a 2-month project just picking a name, because I wanted something to be the message of the show of conversation. So when it comes to movies, that's the obvious. When I picked Wire, that one to me was the beacon of conversation. It's just having that pipeline of communication down the wire. And it's not just a random contemporary name that we'll see on news articles or news stations, because you have the Daily Wire, you have all this. That the Movie Wire has bigger meaning for me, where it just demonstrates, and I hope my content comes through that way. I can really hope it does. That it comes through as the communication aspect of it. So I didn't want a generic name. I didn't want a name that just had movies in it, or Justin Talks Movies, or something that's just forgettable. So to me, the title of the Movie Wire means so much, because my sole purpose is, again, to open up that dialogue, to wire that information to people that I appreciate tuned into the show.
Yeah, I think it's kind of retro sounding. Like I think of like a Morse code thing or a telegraph, like a doo, 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 the Movie Wire. Like that's what I think of. So
exactly.
Well, we're movie nuts, and it's obvious because we are doing multiple movie podcasts. So I want to see if we can root into some deep-seated movie memories with you. And we'll be playing the same kind of show on me on your show eventually. But this is where we get our chance to learn more about you. So I got 6 questions to dive into the movie brain of the movie Wire. Number 1, what is your most memorable movie theater experience?
So I think a lot of us movie lovers can relate to this one. Nothing beats your first movie experience when your parents take you or a guardian takes you or whatever it may be. I think it's still so vivid in my mind of standing outside the movie theater, looking at the movie posters. And I think on my first visit to your show, we talked about this, is having the Fox and the Hound movie poster, Robin Williams on the microphone in Good Morning Vietnam. And my dad, knowing he was supposed to take us to Fox and the Hound, kind of tempted us over to Good Morning Vietnam. So,
good choice.
Yeah. And that one is just, even as a kid, that one was so vivid for me that I remember every moment of that movie. And we get that a lot in movies where we have kind of that silly fluff of animation and stuff like that that don't really
Right.
challenge youth. This movie, there was enough there to really challenge and make me critically think and somewhat understand what's going on. So to me, the first experience is always going to be the best one. But this one, it almost ties because I also have one more. There's a couple guys I grew up with who have become I wouldn't say big in Hollywood, but they're there. I grew up with Kevin Hamadadi and Brett Davern. Kevin Hamadadi, of course, did Zombies of Mass Destruction and a couple other independent. He's a producer now, and Brett Davern, who will spout all day long that his best works are The Pool Boys, Beautiful in Ohio with William Hurt. But people will always remember him as the basketball guy in movie 43. So, but anytime these guys come out with a movie, it's a great experience going into it because of the audience reaction. And an audience reaction is really what makes a film going experience magical. And especially if you can relate it to people that you grew up with and see their success and share that with them, along with people that are having a good time. I think anytime I can experience that with people that I care for and see them on the big screen, I think that gives me such joy to watch them on screen. So I think between movie 43, which I will tell him is to his face, it's a god awful movie in my opinion, but I do love the fact that the audience reactions really had a good time with it.
I still think it has Hugh Jackman's best performance, in my opinion, but hey, that's just me.
Okay, I like that clip. That was the one I would say I would enjoy.
What was the first movie review you ever wrote? Do you remember the film?
I do, actually, because it got me out of school.
Oh.
It was Jurassic Park: The Lost World. I was, I believe, in 7th, 8th grade, if I remember correctly. And I was in jazz, and I really wanted to see this movie. And my parents, I know, wouldn't let me go probably when I got home. And I wanted to see it on opening day. So I begged my jazz teacher to let me just leave early to go see it. And he made a deal with me, is if I wrote a review and handed it in the next day, then he'll allow it. So Jurassic Park: The Lost World was my very first review, and I still have that to this day framed.
Did you give it like a rating?
I did, actually. So I did, because again, Seattle Times, they did 4 stars, so I copied that.
Right.
I gave it 2.5, I believe.
Yeah, that's fair. That's what I would have given it.
Yeah, nothing beats the
Solid
original
2.5.
experience, but it was all right. So, but the feedback that he gave was, I'm sure he was being nice and a teacher, but he says he will definitely not go see it.
Okay, how about this? The first film that you knew you hated.
This one's easy. Okay. Mac and Me.
Don't tell Paul Rudd that.
So this one, again, dad taking us to the movies, and this was kind of mom getting us out of the house. It would be a movie trip. So I remember we were walking out of the movie, and God, even as a kid, like I think I must have been like 7, 6. I, it was awful. And my dad, we can kind of feel it. And we had open dialogues after movies, and he said, "What'd you think?" I'm like, "I thought it stunk." He's like, "All right." So we got in line. He felt bad, I'm sure. So we got in line and we bought tickets to the Blob that was playing at the same time. So we ended up
Nice.
going to see a double feature of the Blob right after.
The first film that you ever pirated/dubbed.
Oh God, FBI is gonna be knocking down my door, I'm sure.
Statutes limitations, man. You're good.
So this one, it was around Halloween. I can't remember the year, but I remember I was gonna have a bad horror movie night with a girl that I really wanted to date, and I wanted to bring to the table some things I know nobody really saw. So, remember going to Scarecrow Video. They didn't have it, surprisingly. And of course they wouldn't the one time they don't have something. But I pirated Basket Case and what was it was Basket Case and Killer Condom.
Killer Condom. Seen the cover art, never watched that one. But Basket Case is good. I'd have copied. I think I probably did pirate that one. So
Basket Case is great. Killer Condom, you can miss that one.
I'll take your word for it. All right, Mr. Podcaster. I know that you don't do as many hosted episodes as I do, but you get your dream guest to join you on the Movie Wire. Maybe to talk about movies. Maybe it's to go to a movie together and share critiques, Siskel and Ebert style, like we do on Back to the Balcony. Who is your dream guest?
This one's going to sound really cliche, but it really shouldn't, because this is a guy that really has a love of cinema, and he's not afraid to say he absolutely loves a bad movie. He gave rave reviews for Crawl, and I think you know where I'm going to go with this. He's there at the box office for Barbenheimer. He just has an overall love of cinema, and he is the most raw, candid, honest filmmaker when he gets on a microphone or if he gets in front of a camera, and that's Quentin Tarantino.
Mhm.
So he is the most energetic, passionate man around filmmakers. And this question kind of gets me thinking is, you get a filmmaker, and I've talked about this before on some filmmakers that I can't stand, that just talk about themselves on what their vision is or what they do. Tarantino does that in a way, but it's almost an inclusion piece of it, where he focuses more on the love of past films, the love of current films, and his style of what he really wants to aim for, with the underlying message of motivation to those that want to get involved in film. Like he says, you don't have to go to school. You don't have to study all the time. You just need to have a love of movies. And that is a message from an absolute brilliant filmmaker. That is what we need for youth today and for movies to survive, is to have that hope of just having a love of your ideas and having a love of cinema and love of the filmmaking process. So I think with how raw he is one of the most motivational filmmakers that I would love to just have a conversation with.
Yeah, it's cliche as hell. Like, you can't think of a more cliche guy. But I've always said this about Tarantino, that Tarantino is the roadmap to the past. Like, and he's open about it, right? He doesn't try and pass any of the bullshit off as his own. He has said some weird things about, like, oh, I've never seen that movie. It's like, well, obviously you have. Maybe you just don't remember it, but I forgive him for that. But I can honestly say that, like, my show would not exist if he as a filmmaker didn't exist. Like, without Tarantino, I would have never seen Switchblade Sisters or Coffee or any of those Jack Hill movies of the 70s or any of the Filipino exploitation movies that he loves to put homages to in his movies. So yeah, I would have never thought about those films had I not been obsessed with Tarantino movies in the 90s and early 2000s, and then taken the roadmap to the past, where all these films that are now sitting on my shelves really got me into this. So even though I would not pick that as mine because it's cliche, I get what you're talking about, because I would not be doing this. I would not have books and movies and all these different things going on about cult cinema an obscure film if it wasn't for Quentin Tarantino. So I totally understand why you'd pick that. And, when you ask me this question on your episode, I still don't have a solid answer because there's so many. Now, I did say Tarantino on an episode that our friend Dan at Casting Views did. He does this Guess Who's Coming to Dinner format where it's like he brings on a guest and he says, okay, you get to bring 5 people to dinner. Who are they? And I did include Tarantino in that list of 5 people because it was 5 people to fill a list. And I'm like, yeah, I'll throw him in there, So I'm with you on that. But dream guest, like, here's my biggest fear. If I picked him as my dream guest, I wouldn't be talking. I would just want to listen to him talk, and then it's just the Quentin Tarantino show. So I'd have to pick somebody that I know I could have a good discourse with, right? Like that's the whole point of being like a podcast host. And I think I'd fanboy a little too much.
Yeah. Well, the problem I have with a lot of the filmmakers is it's gotten more political. It's gotten more structured. It's gotten more where the studios have a little bit more control of what filmmakers can say about said movie. So when it comes to the honesty of the filmmaking process, there's not a lot of filmmakers currently that can really just go out and speak their mind. The respect to Tarantino is he is all in on the movies that he does, and he owns the vision that he has in each movie. And even from old to new, and I know we've said that before between us, but there are tastes of the old and new in a lot of his films. And his love for movie is undeniable, obviously, but I think he is not just a pathway where movies have been to this point now, but even if he, again, decides to retire, this one is going to be a pathway that he's going to be influencing future filmmakers. And I think a conversation with him on just have that raw conversation piece, even though I wouldn't get a word in, I 100% agree, but it's almost worthwhile just to have him see that in-person passion talk in front of you.
Yeah. Well, because he created a genre. I mean, very few filmmakers can actually say that. And yes, his genre is compiled of micro genres. Like, no one's denying that. But there's no doubt, there's no ignoring the fact that if you were a teenager or in your 20s in the 90s, that every month there was at least 2 or 3 Tarantino ripoffs in the theater. Like, everyone was trying to make the new Tarantino or Tarantino-ish movie. It's the same thing with Hitchcock and Scorsese. Like, I feel like every 20 years there has to be a filmmaker where everyone wants to be what he is. In my opinion, the filmmaker that's of our generation that everyone kind of wants to be right now is everyone wants to be Ari Aster. Like, everyone's now in this A24 vibe, and they got to make these like weird kind of avant-garde and uncomfortable thrillers and horror movies. That has to happen. You have to have people that be the catalyst every 15, 20 years to create these little micro genres and have a bunch of copycats, and some of those realize what they're doing and then evolve into something else. And that's the way the machine should work. And we're not even going to get into it because we talked about it so much, but this manufactured idea of filmmaking, thanks to like Marvel and Disney, and sorry to my friends that work at Universal, but Universal with the Fast and Furious movies, like, we're getting more of that. And I think the pushback is clear. It's obvious. Otherwise, A24, Neon, they would not be seeing as much success as they are right now. I agree with you on that.
Yeah, 100%. It's turning into, like you said, an assembly line of films that just really just get pumped out. And it's to a point where even with some genres, it's hard to tell one movie from another. And I think at one point I've actually gotten 2 movies confused because they were so alike on one episode that I had to remind myself of what separates these 2 movies. So there is a lot that's coming up. And what I'm hoping in the evolution of film, and again, we can get into this in a whole other topic, is it's going to get to a reset. And we disassemble all these films to the point where we get that creativity back.
I'm first in line for it. I can't wait. So now the final question of the evening, which is my favorite question. If you could John Malkovich anyone in the industry, as in You get to open the little tiny door and go through the portal and go into the head of this industry person and live their life for a day. Who would it be?
I think you already said it, and I don't know if you mentioned if it could be dead or alive, but you've mentioned this name before, and I don't. And again, it may seem cliche, but at the same time, there is no greater character study in a filmmaker than Alfred Hitchcock. This
Mhm.
man himself is almost a plot in his entirety, where you can spend hours just watching him and just studying him to figure out his not only his creativity but how he ticks. This man is a complete almost mystery, and even when you think you know this man from reading books, from watching documentaries, whatever it may be, or even the movie that came out, there is nothing out there that's really going to show you how this man thought.
I think it's a great choice. One of my favorite things is that Sam Raimi, at some point after the first Evil Dead, decided that if he was going to take himself seriously as a filmmaker, he had to show up on set in a suit and tie every day, just like Hitchcock. And every film he's made since then, he shows up in a suit and tie. It could be a splatter fest, right? He's still showing up in his suit and tie. He's wearing the uniform of a professional filmmaker because that's what he wanted to be, was like Hitchcock. So I think it's a great choice, 100%.
Well, you look at it, and he's one of the filmmakers that you take even current to 70s, 80s, whatever it may be. He is one of the most intimidating filmmakers that almost a lot of filmmakers shined away from, because they almost know they can't mimic that guy's magic. They can take different shadows, and I think the shadow technique in film really evolved from Hitchcock and the way he really defined how lighting works in his films. So I think with the technical aspect, we see that in a lot of films that grew up to even now. But when it comes to his character direction, when it comes to the way he shot with his camera, these are techniques with him that only can come from a Hitchcock film. These are the one strategies that nobody else, no matter how much they want to say they got the influence from Hitchcock in their film, has never been replicated.
I agree. And I like the fact that he did not venture too far outside of what he knew he was good at. You know, he could have some comedy in his movies and he could have some romance in his movies, but he wasn't making comedies and he wasn't making romances. I mean, Trouble with Harry is a comedy, but it's dark enough to not be like, oh, this is a slapstick, laugh out loud riot, right? And I like that. I like filmmakers that feel comfortable in their groove. And some people might say, oh, well, they're just doing what they do. You know, that's why Hitchcockian is a word in the dictionary. You know, some people even say the same thing about PTA. It's like, well, he's good at what he does, you know, and I think there isn't anything wrong with a filmmaker saying, if I venture too outside of what people know me and love me for, well, then they're just going to shit on it. And why would I want to put myself through that, you know? Tarantino said years ago that he really, really, really wanted to make just a balls to the wall Zucker Abrams type movie, like a Zaz movie, like an Airplane or a Naked Gun, and just make it hard R and super goofy and silly. But he's like, but if I do that, everyone's going to shit on it. Like, no one's going to call it a Tarantino movie. They're going to call it the Tarantino flop. They're going to call it the Tarantino mistake, whatever. And I get it. There is a personal pride with that, where he's stopping at 10 movies. Who knows? He might take that back. Some people do, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's like, okay, you found your niche. You found your niche that people will pay to go see your movie. That's the other big thing that you and I have talked about, is like calculated risks versus risks based on ego. That's the determining factor of like your longevity in this industry. Like, if you're just playing with ego and not with the calculations of, oh, this is studio's money and this is theater's money and this is people's money. Like, I'm not going to just make something that is not going to draw an audience. You know, save that for streaming. Save that for Netflix. Let them pay you $200 million for a movie you give a shit about.
Audiences to critics have this certain expectation, and they're going to base his previous work on that. And then what happens next. It's going to scare studios. Whether it's good or not, it's going to scare studios because it's a risk. And that's, again, what Hitchcock did really good, as you spoke to. So I think a lot of filmmakers, there's a fear in current times of not steering off course to what the studios and the assembly line films are going after, because there are a lot of limitations. Back then, with Hitchcock, even his character direction, we will never see that again. There will never, ever be the way Hitchcock ran his set in current times. That's what makes him so special and almost a character study to why he motivated his cast that way and why he shot the films the way he did. So it is a treasure. And again, one of those things that we have to respect film from back in the day, just mainly with how filmmakers created these visions.
So as we come to the end of this conversation, once again, we have to say, this really is a shameless plug for our new show, Back to the Balcony. But I feel that these are the conversations that if we let ourselves go in an episode of Back to the Balcony, well, it'd be 2 hours long and people would lose interest. That's the biggest challenge, I think, is when we get really, really into a conversation, but we know we have to leave room for the main subject matter, which is the critique of Siskel and Ebert. So I'm glad we had this chance to kind of get that out of our systems, get the sillies out.
It's a relief, especially with our last episode. I think we could have gone on that hasn't been
released.
That
could have been a two-parter.
Oh, God.
100%.
So, no, I feel a huge relief now that we got it all off our chest. So I think it needed to be said, even though it's a shameless plug. I think things just needed to be grounded and really need to be discussed.
100%. Okay, so everyone, Back to the Balcony. It's on all pod platforms. It's on YouTube. If you watch it on YouTube, you get to see clips and pictures of the movies you're talking about. You get to hear and see some visualizations from the show. And then the audio version, it's just, the same thing, but without all the fun. And you want some fun. But the Movie Wire, that's what we are really here to talk about tonight as well. So Justin, where can people find the Movie Wire?
You can check out the Movie Wire on themoviewire.com. You can follow me on all the socials at Movie Wire Show and listen on YouTube and all respected podcast platforms.
And I got to say, once again, follow us on Letterboxd. I'm under the Cultworthy. He's under the Movie Wire Show. And that's where you can read our reviews and our star ratings on the movies we talk about on Back to the Balcony, because we don't give them ratings on the show. And it's a great app that I'm really kind of even getting more involved with, because there are a lot of other podcasters and film and movie influencers on Instagram and TikTok that are all looking at what we're putting on. And it's just a great way to build that community and see what other people who are of similar mindsets are saying about these same movies and rediscovering them. That's the cool thing. It's that really is one of the few social media apps for film lovers, and it's just great.
Yeah, and it's always interesting to see, again, all the different points of view across the board, and there are a lot of different points of view.
So everyone, like I said, you can find all of his stuff on themoviewire.com. You can find me on thecultworthy.com. Links to all the shows. Go back and listen to our back episodes. And hey, if there's any movies that you think that we should re-examine from the point of view of Siskel and Ebert and they got reviews for them, let us know and we'll put them to our list, because our list is growing, but it's by no means anywhere close to being finished. There's still plenty of space.
And I'd be curious on what people email in on what films that they saw that they agreed with or didn't agree with. So I think if they can email in movies, I think that would be an even greater discussion.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that more on future episodes. So once again, I'm Antonio Palacios. This is the Cult-Worthy Cinema Podcast. My guest was Justin Henson of the Movie Wire. Please follow us on Back to the Balcony, and we'll see you next week.